Don't get me wrong, okay? I do not hate Need for Speed Unbound. I like the link-ups, racing with Burst Nitrous is fun, I got a lot of hours out of the online modes, and I was about to get a lot more when I heard that drag racing was making its way back to the scene. Underground 2 and Most Wanted's drag races still hold up to this day. They're always a joy to come back to, and they're still at the top despite future titles having them. So it was great to see them make a return, especially when they said that lane switching was coming back with it. And what's more, Volume 7 is Underground themed. So this should be a slam dunk, right? Just give us some curvy straights, congested traffic lanes, and a simple but skill-based shifting system, and we're golden. Well, we have the straights. At first I thought it was just me, right? I mean, my first race was in A rank and I screwed up the shifting, so I said to myself, just get me to S+, so we can see how out of control this can really get. Okay, so then I thought that I was broken. Seriously, I assumed that my expectations were too high and that disappointment was inevitable. I'm blinded by nostalgia, and this kind of drag racing just isn't for me. Yeah, no, this sucks. 6 drag races in one playlist? The point of drag racing is to get in, win or lose, and get out. That's the appeal of it. It goes by in a snap. These drag races, however, don't. First you sit through a loading screen, then the intro plays, then you have to do the burn rubber minigame, which is something I don't really get because in real life they just, burn rubber. Instead, we start and stop to get into the sweet spot when this easily could have been a mash the button minigame instead. Then after all that, you finally get to race for 20 seconds. Then you go through it all again 5 more times, even if everyone else leaves the race. Side note, I hate that there's no short single races in this game. There's no reason there shouldn't be any other than it being a cheap way to garner playtime. You almost spend more time getting through the preliminaries than you do the actual racing, but maybe that problem would be alleviated if the actual racing was any fun. First and foremost, I'm going to show you some clips of the olden days of drag racing at the highest level, and then I'm going to compare them to today. Anyone notice the difference? I'm sure you can, because here comes another one of Unbound's problems, the sense of speed. Unbound's sense of speed, while not awful, is a noticeable step back. I don't know why they changed it from Heat because it was great there, with the exception of it disappearing when you go over 200 miles. Then again, it could be worse. But whoops! This mindset got thrown out of the window when I started drag racing. One contributor to Unbound's sense of speed is the regular Nitrous. There's camera shake, the field of view is tightened as opposed to merely zooming out the camera. Here's the difference if that sounds funny to you.
Last seen heading east near the Omega power station. I need units to clear and start up. More details on that call.
And since you have so much of it, it's like this most of the time, so it feels normal, right? But in drag racing, regular Nitrous is turned off. And like in Payback, only perfect shifts grant you extra Nitrous. So you're stuck with how the sense of speed actually is, with 1 moment of velocity from the burst Nitrous you shifted for. These races feel so much more like a bike ride than a fast-paced, high-octane highway to victory, and it only further exacerbates the issues with the sense of speed that the Nitrous system mostly suppressed. So when I'm racing, I'm not constantly looking around for danger at the road blazing by. I'm doing nothing but sitting around and staring as my car takes a leisurely 30 to 45 second stroll across the finish line. But the sense of speed is the least of drag racing's problems. Where are the pedestrians? I understand you can't implement them like you did in the past because it's not trial and error anymore, but you can't make any scripts that have a good amount of pedestrians spawn in ways where players are forced to use their wits and dodge them? Shit, there's more pedestrians in a regular sprint than there are in a racing mode whose challenge is reliant on how many of them there are during the race. 90% of the time, I'm not even dodging pedestrians. I just turn in free lanes out of boredom. If you break it down, it's essentially just CSR racing, but at least in CSR, the shifting mechanics themselves were the challenge. Until you hit the paywall, that is. Speaking of shifting mechanics, let me tell you about why the perfect shift / nitrous system sucks. In 05, drag racing's challenge is based around 3 factors: shifting, nitrous management, and dodging pedestrians. Shifting and Nitrous were both mutually exclusive systems. With how much speed you would lose either dodging pedestrians or turning corners, perfect shifts and making sure you got enough Nitrous to pull through were imperative. The slightest mishap, mistake, or misshift could cost you the race. There were many factors within your control that were key to your survival. In Unbound, your Nitrous is tied to how good you did on the burn rubber minigame, which is impossible to lose, and how many perfect shifts you get. Perfect shifts of which are inconsistent. Here's how they work. Like in Underground in 05, there's a gauge on the left and an arrow in the middle that tells you when you need to shift. But also not really though, because that arrow in Unbound is a liar. You're actually supposed to look at the gauge because there's a green zone you have to shift in that gets smaller after each shift. But also not really though, because even the gauge lies to you. They seriously expect us to look all the way over there, hoping to God, whilst dodging pedestrians and keeping opponents away by blocking their passes. Which is easy to do because there are no pedestrians in the first place, but that's not the point. With the arrow being inconsistent, in S+ races when you get a perfect launch and your limiter bolts up and down like a kid sipping Sprite, it's close to impossible to get a perfect shift on the first 2 gears. So that's 2, maybe even 3 shifts without burst nitrous depending on how many revs your car allows. Considering that 2 perfect shifts are 1 level of burst nitrous, if you get 2 more shifts, that's level 3 counting the first 2 from the burn rubber minigame, leaving you with 1 shift left, unless your car has 7 or 8 gears. Oh, so now I have to resort to a car with a high gear count? And even then, at most that's 2 extra levels given that you don't lose any because your burst nitrous doesn't refill until after the tank is emptied. On top of that, by those guidelines, the races would have to be rank S or S+. Good luck anywhere below that. There has been a strat where people quickly shift down and up to refill their burst nitrous, but realistically it doesn't matter anyway because you can easily make it to top speed after spending the level 3 burst. So any more nitrous after that is pointless, unless you crash, but come on, have you ever seen more than 1 player crash in a race in multiple rounds? But it gets worse. Another thing is that there aren't good, great, or bad shifts anymore. There's no engine blow meter either, so there's not much pushback for shifting too early or too late aside from missing out on burst nitrous, which I stated previously that you're pretty much good to go for the rest of the race if you can get up to level 3 once. Combine all this with the aforementioned pedestrian problem, drag racing as a whole is a cakewalk. The player's input changes little to nothing in terms of the outcome, so like it has been for a long time in Need for Speed, it all comes down to whoever plays to the meta. New game mode, same old bullshit. No room to improve, no ceiling to climb to, no shot. And I think a lot of people share my pain because nobody wants to do drag races anymore. I tried going to different servers to no avail. Not many players open playlists, nor do they accept mine when I open them either, even when they're S+. At one point, it took me 7 minutes to find 1 racer. This footage was recorded less than 2 weeks after Volume 7's release. And the icing on the cake? I went through all of that waiting just for him to quit after 1 round. And before you say it, of course I know that there's PvP. But even there, it usually results in me and 1 other player sitting around waiting for the minute-long countdown to end. To give drag racing the benefitest of doubts, it could be an isolated issue. Maybe I'm just unlucky, but I can't say it isn't concerning. To sum up my thoughts on Unbound's drag racing, it's not abhorrent, it's not broken, it's just shallow and boring. The update as a whole is fine, I guess. Even though I wasn't the greatest at it, Drift Pro is kinda fun. It should have replaced the standard because there's genuine depth to the Pro system itself, plus it's fun to slide around at high speeds. I don't really know why they couldn't just make the changes universal because nobody's going back to regular drifting, and I don't know why this wasn't implemented from the get-go, but good on you guys. The new cars are also fine. I don't really care for the roster at this point. I'm only pissed about the Mustang because of course they put the blower on the car lock behind a paywall. However, I'm not feeling the underground influence, and by that I mean that there's no underground influence at all. There are some items based on it, but it just feels like an excuse to lean on nostalgia. And these aren't spinners, you donuts! All in all, just another day in the life of a Need for Speed fan. Now if you'll excuse me, it's good to be home. Thank you all for watching, and have a spectacular rest of your day.